I'm Hannah Brackey. I'm the VP of Product here at LabKey and really excited to talk to you about our LIMS and how you can manage workflow, samples, and data together. And so today I'm going to briefly introduce LabKey, and then we're really going to be spending the most of our time in a live demo. We've got a fun sort of fictional scientific scenario which allows us to see the flexibility of our system and hopefully ignite your imaginations on how you might use it for your laboratory. But these workflows are going to be really similar to what real labs deal with every day. And it gives us a really nice way to show how flexible the system is without getting too specific in one scenario. So before we jump into that demo, I want to spend a few minutes on who LabKey is and what our LIMS offers. So a quick word about us as a company. We've been around for over 20 years, working across life sciences, environmental sciences, mining, agriculture, and more. And what that really means in practice is that we've seen a lot of different lab workflows, which are both in the regulated and non-regulated space. We also design our software to adapt to how labs actually work, rather than forcing you into a rigid process or requiring you to change your SOPs to fit that software. And so today's demo really aims to reflect that, and you'll be able to see we've got multiple sample types, evolving workflows, and different types of data all living together in sort of this singular centralized system. And what makes LabKey different is that we're not just a software vendor, we really see ourselves as a partner in science, which means that we're really spending the time to understand how your lab specifically works, helping advise on the configuration of those workflows that fits that reality for you, and making sure that you're well supported all the way from implementation to adoption and ongoing maintenance. So at a high level, LabKey LIMS is a configurable, low-code, cloud-based platform that's really designed to be easy to use in real labs. So instead of forcing you into these hard-to-change workflows, it allows teams to adapt to how your lab operates and continues to adapt as your science evolves as well. One of the biggest challenges we see is data spread across spreadsheets, ELNs, instruments, and other shared drives. So LabKey helps connect that data so teams aren't constantly having to reconcile that information by hand or spending time hunting for the data that they're looking for that really should already be accessible. And as labs become larger or become more regulated, permissions, traceability, and audit readiness are already built into the system, and they're not bolted on later, when that QA requirement may show up. So what can you do with a LIMS and specifically with LabKey LIMS? And it really starts with sort of sample registration, being able to uniquely identify every sample or material that is coming into the lab. That's how you avoid kind of that initial mislabeling and loss as the volume of material increases within the laboratory. From there, LabKey LIMS is helping maintain that end-to-end traceability across people, instruments, locations, and other handoffs that happen within the lab. And so you always know that sample's status and its history. Labs also use LabKey LIMS to standardize these repeatable workflows. So preparation, testing, review, release, all of these having clear handoffs and checkpoints without having to micromanage team members or continually follow up. And all of these results are captured with that full scientific context. So metadata, methods, attachments, related records, that data actually becomes usable later rather than just being stored. And then finally, the audit readiness really helps support labs in growth or during audits. And so you don't actually have to go through and reconstruct what happens. This is already built into the system, and that record is already there when you need it. And so we're going to go through each of these in the demo. And before I get into that, I'll just kind of explain the scientific use case that we have today. We have a research institute that has returned from this deep space mission, and they're bringing back two different categories of samples. So we have both environmental samples as well as biological specimens from newly discovered organisms within this planet. And so the lab's goal are really pretty familiar, hopefully, to most of us. We want to collect and process those samples and analyze the environmental composition, as well as collect and process the biological samples and extract, sequence, and store that DNA. So even if you're not talking about environmental or necessarily biological samples, this is hopefully going to give you a broad sense of how you might manage sample processing, receipt, and testing within your lab. And so across all of this at any time, they also want to be able to answer these questions. Where did the sample come from? How is it processed? And what data was generated from it? So today we're really going to show you how this works in practice. And we're going to do it all inside kind of a single workflow job within LabKey. And it'll kind of track to this map here. And this is really sort of tracking that full protocol. We'll be able to see kind of that collection site registration all the way through those sequencing results. So we'll jump into the live demo. And this is our LabKey LIMS dashboard for Project Xenome. And you can think of this as sort of your lab's home base. It's a real-time snapshot of what's happening within the lab. And so across the top, you are able to see all of the different types of entities that you have registered within our system. We have source types that capture the collection site, as well as metadata around it, as well as the organism that might have been found on these planets. We have the sample types that we're collecting as well as processing into, and our assays or test types that we're running on those samples. We get a clear view into storage, and then we're able to do some of our work in workflows or sample pick lists as we go on. LabKey LIMS is a sample-centric system, so we're able to track samples that have not yet been registered or not yet been received into the lab, but then also be able to view samples that have long been consumed or used already within the lab. And so that's what we're seeing here in terms of the bar chart breakdown, being able to track kind of where those samples are in our process. We have our electronic laboratory notebook component that allows us to track pros and hypotheses, as well as explanations of results within a text editor, as well as the workflow job list, which really is sort of the work that's assigned to me on any given day. So what we're going to start out with here is sort of going through that workflow job. And I'm going to pretend that we've sort of started at this collection site. And so we're just sort of finishing this fifth collection site here. And I'm actually going to start a brand new job today and choose sort of this analysis template. And so here we'll say my demo workflow. I'm able to give it a description, assign a job owner, notify additional users here as well who might want to know about the progress of the work. So we'll just add Bernie, and he's going to receive updates as we go on. And then I'm able to have kind of the job start and due dates. And so here, we'll give ourselves a week or so to get through this work. And I can also set the priority level here. I'll indicate kind of a project code that I have, and the tasks as set as part of these template are fixed. And so this is really allowing me to set a group of standardized work that I might assign to other users within the system. And we're starting out with this collection site. So I'm going to finish creating that job. And the first thing we do here is we want to now register organisms that are part of this collection site. And so I'm going to go through and derive these organisms. Everything is sort of preset for me based on the template that we created. And rather than having you type, having you watch me type, I'll just copy and paste here. But we're going to create these organisms, which are now registered in the system. These organisms are immediately added to this job as well. So we're able to look at our sources here and see that these organisms are now associated with the job. They are also associated with the collection site. So if I go into one of these organisms, I can view sort of a detailed section of this particular organism with its parent details, but more readily, I can actually see this on the lineage. And so here we can see that this organism has been connected to that initial collection site. We're going to go back to the job and continue our task. So we've registered these organisms. Now I have these physical sort of biological samples that we've taken from those organisms. I'm ready to register them in the lab. And so we'll go through this process and do something similar. I'm going to generate these samples, and these are automatically going to get added to the workflow job, as you see here, as well as that automatic connection between the samples and the organism and also that collection site. So if we look at the lineage, we can see all the way up here now as well. I'm going to go through and register some of the other samples that we have, and this is all fairly standardized. And so we've got sort of these 5 environmental samples that I want to register. I can continue to sort of do that. When I get to the point where I'm now wanting to store these samples, our workflow template is set up to add these samples to storage. So now I can select storage and add them to a box. I can move these around in the box if I want to, kind of get them organized in the way that I would physically put them. And these are now added to that box, which is sort of part of the task. I can process the samples within this workflow job as well. And the action is fairly similar, where I'm deriving these environmental extracts. I also get the opportunity to update the parent status. So those initial samples are marked as processed and removed from storage kind of at the same time. And these are then added to the job as well. So the last thing I want to show as part of this workflow job is this ability to import data as well. So I now have those environmental extracts. I'm in a super light speed lab where I was able to do all of that in 3 minutes. And here now I want to upload sort of the test results that I have for this composition analysis. And so I'm going to choose to sort of import data. And I could do this manually, which is what I like to do for demos so everybody can see. But more typically, I probably have a file that my instrument generated. And so I can import this file, or in some cases, I can automatically get this file to be imported from our system. So I'm just going to fill these sections out. And again, this is something that I could do manually or with a file import. And when I import that data, that is also associated now in this workflow job or work packet that we're working on. So I can see the composition analysis. And here I've actually indicated whether or not my results are pass fail. I may need to go through and review them. And so I can set these as calculated columns with sort of formatting based on the failure. Or if the instrument is providing me with that, I can do that there as well. In each of these scenarios, I'm able to see the assay results as part of this work packet. But if I also look at the composition analysis overall, we can see that I've done this 5 or so times. I can actually look at all of the results combined, and this allows me to look for trends in analysis or compare data across runs, which is typically very hard to do in spreadsheets. The other thing I can do here is generate charts to be able to analyze my data a bit better. So here I've got this average material index or mineral index by collection site, and that allows me to sort of evaluate on that collection site level what that mineral index looks like. Or in this case, I have sort of the organic content by collection site as well. And so again, fake data, so it's all very pretty and standardized, but allows me to quickly analyze or identify the work here. And so I'll go to my workflow jobs home here, where I can see all of the jobs that our lab has run, as well as the job that's in my queue, or if somebody has notified me on a job, I can go through and look at this work and be able to see kind of where our laboratory is at in terms of the analysis that we're doing and finding. For each of the grids that you see within our system, these are all highly customizable and flexible in terms of what information we're actually wanting to track. So if we look at the biological samples, we have information like the sample type and the organism. But if we look at our environmental samples, we're actually looking at a few different types of fields for those specifically. So that allows us to get that specificity that we need on tracking those individual sample types. If I look at one of these lineage graphs again, now that we've kind of built it out, we can see that from the environmental sample, we actually have the extract that was created as well. We can go up a level and look at all of the different samples that were generated from this collection site. We can see this in the lineage, although for larger projects, this might get a little bit harder to read. We do have a grid of all of the samples that were generated as part of this collection site. We're also rolling up sort of the assays that were executed on samples from this collection site, as well as any of the workflow jobs, these work packets that we did to execute the work. This allows us to really contain all of the work that we're doing for, in this case, a site, or in other organizations or industries, maybe this might be a project or a client or a participant or an animal, something like that, to really let you see all of the work that has been sort of executed there. The other thing about these grids is that you're able to sort and filter them like you would in Excel. And so that allows for a lot of flexibility in being able to find what you need. Let's say we have, a given terrain type that we're looking for. I can also view additional reports on these samples, like finding all of the derivatives for this collection site as well. And so the last thing that I want to show here is being able to find samples. So we have multiple ways. You can either do sort of this global search on samples, or if you have scanners within your lab and all of your samples are barcoded, you can easily find those samples by barcode. But the thing I really want to show today is around Sample Finder. And this allows us to ask more basic questions of our data without maybe knowing exactly, what collection site we're looking for or organism type. And so here is where I can start layering on the properties. So let's say I'm looking for a collection site that is of a specific region, right? So let's pick the equator. Then I can start to find samples and say, oh, well, I'm actually really interested in samples that, let's say, have sequencing on them. And so we want to be able to or find samples that don't have sequencing. And that allows me to actually create a list of these DNA samples. Now I can add to a workflow job to get sequenced. And so from there, we'll go back to the slides here. And really, hopefully you're able to see that the LabKey LIMS really has these lab managed workflows that are highly flexible, configured by laboratories, not some software vendor across the country, that they're able to have audit ready standards from day one and really prepare your lab for what's next. And so having these configurable workflows, the traceability of how that work is performed, and then having that layered on this really structured, adaptable data model that allows labs to have full ownership of this really supports what a real lab looks like with that evolution of experiments and protocols. And then lastly, LabKey LIMS is AI ready by having these structured data sets. And we have an MCP that folks can access to be able to interrogate their data further. So we'll save some time for questions, and I'll go through those in a minute. But if you're interested in learning more, we always do these guided evaluations that really help people understand how their work is going to be captured within LabKey LIMS. And so we'll do this discovery step where we go through a demo much deeper than what we showed today, and really try and map the LabKey LIMS to the processes that you have. And then we'll configure a trial environment to let you see what your data looks like, or examples of your data may look like within our system. And we'll iterate on that, to continue to make that better. And then lastly, we'll give you that trial to be able to play around with and get your hands dirty in, that really gives you a good sense of whether or not our LIMS is going to work for your processes. So definitely keep an eye out for that, and feel free to schedule some time with me to kick that off. So I will jump into questions here. Yeah, so where is the data stored? So the data is typically stored in the cloud. We have our system set up in AWS. We do also have product and tier options that would allow a team to install this locally and have it on premise if that was sort of a restriction of your organization. But we find that most people want to move into the cloud these days, and not have to deal with the overhead and management of maintenance and security that comes with that. An environmental lab that requires prep and checks. A worker may need to add the acid. How does your system account that a certain lot number of acid? Yes. So being able to track kind of reagents that are being added are really something that we can do at the custom metadata field. So you may have seen we had fields for collection date or something like that. We would also be able to add fields that are text choice values or lookups, essentially structured data that lets you say, what is the reagent and the lot number that was used for this experiment? So then you're able to track that later on as well, and look at the analysis in comparison with that lot that you added. Are the chart layouts configurable by end users using a built-in tool? Yes. So the chart that I showed is something that is point and click, and actually everything that I showed today has been set up by me, who is not a developer, that I am pointing and clicking through. So that would be something that you would be able to do as either an administrator or somebody kind of with those privileges on the site. Yes. So it's possible to show, someone mentioned how much they like the lineage visual management of samples and how they can show their customers that. So we do have read access for people if you want to set up kind of access for your customers to be able to read into. What is probably more common, though, is using our APIs or tools to pull that data out and show those to customers as well, mostly because a lot of labs don't want their customers kind of seeing the entire environment. Yeah, so what does your customer service look like? Should that customer have challenges later? This is something that is very ingrained at LabKey, where we support you throughout the process. You get support both during implementation and onboarding, but then also as things are ongoing. And if you poke around on our website, you'll listen to some webinars from customers that always have really nice things to say about our support team. And we really are here for the entire journey, because we know that, once you're onboarded, you're going to continue to want to change and adapt the system to how your lab is working, or potentially expand it. And so we will be there to support you every step of that way. Uniquely, we also don't charge for that service. So this is something that is built into the subscription cost at LabKey. And just a couple more questions here. If we don't get to all of them, we'll make sure to reach out and answer as well. Given multiple different facilities, NGS, mass spec, antibodies, microscopy, is it better to use separate installations or a large installation? It's actually something that I probably would want to have a much larger conversation with, to see how what are the outcomes your organization is looking for. If we're looking for a single centralized database, that might actually be the way to go, where we have multiple of these instances kind of in a single environment. But if you want kind of separability, depending on sort of the regulatory status of any of those labs, there may be some labs that require even more sort of ring fencing. And so LabKey supports both, and it's really kind of up to what those the organization's goals are long term. Perfect. Okay. And then yeah, is there a cost for the guided evaluation? No, there's not a cost. So all of this is built in, again, because LabKey really wants you to be successful, and putting support and trials behind a paywall makes it much harder for you to evaluate and know that the system is going to work for you. Okay, and then the last one here: can resources and services be posted on the internet? I'm not totally sure kind of what resources you're referring to, so I'll reach out sort of separately for that. But if you have any other questions in the meantime, please feel free to send us a note. Thank you guys so much.